Okay. We are going to take a look at our next class dojo episode. And if you remember a few weeks back, we took a look at what happens when we start to tell ourselves a story that's not true in our heads. So when we start to think like negative thoughts, and then we're like, this person probably hates me and they probably think that I'm stupid. I shouldn't have done that because now they think this. And we just imagine terrible situations, right? Today, we're going to find out another perspective of that called a story snake. And this snake is just going to kind of grow and take over the bad story. And I want us to think today about how we can stop the story snake. Say that 3 times fast. Stop the story snake. Stop the story snake. It's hard. But we're going to stop the story snake. Okay. So when we're done, we're going to have some discussion questions about how we can stop this story snake. But I'd like for you to watch this episode and think about the content and think about a time in your life when you had a story snake try to take over.
Mojo had slipped and spilled all the ice cream sandwiches at field day. He was sure that everyone would hate him forever, until Katie told him it was only a story he was telling himself. But he didn't quite understand. Just a story? I mean, I guess it could be. I wish I could talk to Katie more. Where did she go this time? I guess she's busy. Or maybe Katie secretly hates me too. She's probably just too nice to say it, and she left on her own. Katie did leave. That's a fact. Just like how I spilled the ice cream. And they happened right after each other. She doesn't like me. She won't ever like me again. Katie had been nearby giving her drone a pep talk before the big race. Until she spotted something by Mojo. Mojo, look out! Huh? Ah! Katie, you're back. Where did the snake come from? Mojo, your story's created a story snake. A story snake? What's that? When you tell yourself a bad story, it doesn't just stay in one place. It spreads, and if you tell it more and more, it even stretches. It's coming after me! You can't run from a story snake, Mojo. It follows as long as you keep telling it. Oh, great. Just like the ice cream. It never forgets. First, I spilled the ice cream. Now I ruined field day with a giant snake. Forget field day, I ruined the entire field. If everyone didn't hate me before, they definitely will now. Mojo, don't give in to your crazy stories. You have to fight it, or the snake will take over. Really? I hadn't noticed. Help me, Katie. The story's so big it's eating me up. Literally. I can't help you, Mojo, but I know who can. Katie! You can't run from a bad story. You need something that fights it. Something good. Something like this. But what do you think? Can the stories you tell yourself really be as powerful as Katie says? Have you ever told yourself a bad story? And what can you do to fight a bad story?
Into a character that we will discover later on this week. Story snakes. So when we tell ourselves bad stories, when we make things up in our head that are bad about ourselves, they start to take over and they can feel very overwhelming, like a big old snake all over your faces. There are some discussion questions that you are going to go to a breakout room to talk about. What really happens when the story you tell yourself take over? Obviously, we know that there's not actually a big snake that comes and chases you, but there are some crazy things that happen in your head. So when you tell yourself a negative story, you say things that aren't true. Man, I'm terrible. Oh, I'm awful. They probably hate me. When we say those things, what happens? What actually goes on in our brains? Okay, I'm going to send you to those breakout rooms to answer that question.
David.
All righty, welcome back. You were asked to discuss what really happens when the story you tell yourself takes over. What really happens? Obviously, a big old snake doesn't appear, but what actually goes on inside of our heads then? Aiden H?
So in like the movie, it came true, but in real life, it doesn't do that. It's just when you think people hate you, it's not true.
Yeah, it's just kind of this really big thought that happens in our head that we have to say, hey, this isn't true. Thanks for sharing. Christopher, what happens when that story is told in our head?
It's not actually true. It's just that you make it up in your head. And then you can get angry or sad or nervous or
Yeah,
upset
it
about it.
it affects our emotions. You're right. It makes us sad and nervous, and we start to think things that we shouldn't be thinking, right? Those emotions start to take over. Terrence, something to add?
It's like in your head, there's like 1,000 things going on, and you can't focus.
Yeah, just like we couldn't focus if there was a big snake hanging over our heads. I like what you said. There's like 1,000 things going on because our thoughts can't be clear. We're like, oh no, this, oh man, oh, and we just have all these thoughts that go crazy and it's hard to focus. William, something to add?
What I think happens when the story you tell yourself takes over, I think crazy emotions start to happen. Like if I tell myself I can't do this test or something, I'm the worst person at this, then you'll start to have emotions like sadness or you'll be angry.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. I was thinking about like when we do something that affects others, but there are times that we think those things about just ourselves. I can't do this test. I'm the worst ever at this. And yeah, then those emotional responses can make it hard to prove that false. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'd like for you to share about a time a bad story took over for you. Share about a time a bad story took over for you. So, one time that a bad story took over for me was like I shared with you, my parents live across the street. And one day I was going to go out to dinner with them and they were going to come from work. So they said, hey, since we're going to meet you for dinner, could you stop and let our dog out for us? And that way she doesn't have an accident in the house. And I was like, sure, absolutely. So I, after school, made a plan in my head. I'm going to go let Lacey outside, play with her for a little bit, and then I'll go to dinner with my family. Well, I completely forgot to let my parents' dog out. I stayed at school and worked late, and then I went to meet my parents for dinner. And when I got there, my mom said, how was Lacey, which is the dog's name? And I was like, and I realized I completely forgot. And then in my head, I told myself, my parents probably think I'm terrible. They probably think I'm so irresponsible. They're probably so mad at me. And I thought the dinner was ruined. I thought this dinner isn't going to go well because they're going to be so frustrated. And that wasn't true. We were halfway through dinner, and my dad looked at me and he said, hey, Steph, it's a dog. It's going to be okay. And I realized that I had been thinking my parents thought these terrible things that they weren't even thinking. They just thought, oh, well, she forgot. It's okay. But I felt so bad about it that I thought, surely this is not good. This is terrible. So that's a time that a bad story took over for me. So, again, in your breakout room, you're going to share about a time that a bad story took over for you. Okay. When did a bad story take over for you? Okay, welcome back. You were asked to share about a time that you had a bad story take over, and now we're going to ask you to share about a way that you can fight a bad story. So, a way you can fight a bad story. So, here's the way that I fought my bad story. When I thought that my parents were so mad at me and thought that I was irresponsible, I when my dad said that, my dad said, "Hey, it's just a dog." I asked him, I said, "Are you guys mad at me?" And I just asked it straight up. And they were like, "No, of course not. You just forgot. It was a mistake." So my way to fight a bad story is to talk to the person and see if they're actually thinking those things so that we can have a conversation about it and I can understand them better. So my way to fight a bad story is to talk to the person and see if it's true. So think about how you can fight your bad stories, like maybe a time like William shared where you didn't think you were going to do well. How do you fight that? How do you get past thinking those negative things about yourself? Hey, welcome back. You were asked in your breakout rooms to share about what you can do to fight a bad story. So when those powerful emotions start to take over, what can you do to fight that story? Who'd like to share a strategy for how we can fight bad stories that we tell ourselves? Terrence, what can we do?
You could ask are you mad at me? And then you could just go do what they said do.
Yeah. So if your story involves someone else and you're telling yourself, they're so mad at me, they probably don't like me, they probably think this, just go talk to that person. Instead of thinking those negative thoughts over and over in your head, talk it out with that person. William, what about you, bud? How can we fight a bad story?
You could ask them if they're upset, and if they are, you can just ask them what you want to do, or you can just say sorry.
Yeah, having that conversation with that person involved in your story, they might not be upset, and then you're good to go. And if they are upset, you're right. We have an opportunity to accept responsibility and apologize to make it better. What about a bad story that I tell about myself? So, kind of like William shared earlier, like, I'm going to do so bad on this test. I'm not good at this. I'm terrible. This isn't going to go well. How can we fight those feelings about ourselves? What can we do? Oscar, when we're thinking something about ourselves that's not true, how can we change it? Oh no.
Um. So so one time I was like doing something. I was just minding my own business, and I accidentally dropped something, and then it broke, and I was like, oh no, and I thought my parents are gonna get so mad at me, and then and I told them that I broke glass. I thought they would get I thought they're gonna get so mad at me because I dropped something. And then like when I asked them, um, like, it's okay. It was just by accident.
Yeah. So just going back to asking the person that's involved and talking with them directly and saying, like, hey, this is what's going on. Are you thinking these things? Good. I'm thinking if there's times that we feel a bad story about ourselves that we know is not true, we can use that self talk like we've learned in our second steps lesson. We can say things that we know are true about ourselves, or we can say, I need to stop thinking this way, and using those stop signals. William, something to add?
That happened to me one time when I was I was in a baseball game, and I had a few bad plays when I was catching, and then it was the fourth inning, and there was one strike left and two outs. We needed one more out, and I didn't want to miss the ball and have the other team score.
So how did you kind of get yourself out of that funky place?
I told myself I'm a really good catcher. I just gotta kick it in and uh, be more skillful.
Yeah, I like that. I know I'm good at this. I can do this. I'm just making some mistakes right now. Awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember that there will be times in your life that you have a bad story about yourself. You're going to make a mistake, but What I want to challenge you with is, instead of spending time thinking about how terrible that was, catch that story and change it. No, I'm not going to let this ruin my day, like that story snake. I'm not going to let this snake follow me around and make me think 1,000 thoughts like Terrence shared. I'm going to get my mind back in control. And we talked today about ways that we can do that and strategies that we can use.